The Private Label Pod with your host Paul Mooney, brought to you by Private Label People.
You just listen and leave the rest up to us.
Hi, I'm Paul Mooney and welcome to episode 3 of the Private Label Pod. We're going to start with something universal today, and that universal thing is, what does a day-to-day look like for an Amazon seller? And who is better to explain it to us than our very own Mr. Ali Rizzo?
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Hi Ali, how's your morning been?
Busy as always, Paul. I think that came out like a lot more doom and gloom than it sounded. I think it was actually quite good, very productive, but yeah, very busy as well.
What does an average morning look like for you? Is it always busy? Is it does it change from day to day, or is it pretty repetitive?
It's quite repetitive. I think everything kind of structures. Should we start before I get into the office as well? Because
absolutely, yeah. Well, that's a big bit.
I know we were talking about like routines and stuff like that, and I was talking about how my morning's anchored around my little one, getting her to school. So before that, I want to go to the gym and just kind of get the oxygen to the brain and start the day off how I want to go forward. So I did that, did the school run, and then got into the office. And I'd say the other or the second anchor would be the time zones from the UK to China. It's generally there early afternoon to late afternoon whenever I get into the office. So that's prime time to speak to colleagues and agents over in China. So that's what I start the day off, generally 5 days out of the week. Okay,
cool. So you're coming in, you're sort of probably catching up a little bit from the day before. I take it you get some emails that have come in overnight and they're sitting in your inbox and you've got to deal with those first, I take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my kind of prime area and the most important area is current products that are in my control that I want to get into production and move them along that quote unquote conveyor belt. So that's priority number one. And I've got a list of products, multiple at the one time, that I'm always moving along that conveyor belt. But there's also new orders and new products that I'm discussing with agents and suppliers in China. So I'm pretty much kind of looking at the first few hours of the day, tackling those things.
And is it frustrating sometimes? I mean, so you spend a lot of time obviously speaking to suppliers in China. Do they take a while to get back in general, or do you have to chase them, or are they usually pretty good for your business?
Well, they're usually pretty good. I mean, they want the order as well, don't they? So, especially those suppliers that I've been dealing with for a number of years now, they know that I'm a serious seller, and they know that discussions with me will lead to orders, so they're as eager to get the ball rolling on orders as I am. So generally very responsive, and if we're talking about emails, it's generally the same day that they'll get back to me. If it's more our colleagues and our agents that we're speaking to, more of an instant messaging sort of scenario, so it's instant whenever we're talking. It's conversational in that sense.
You're basically a gold member to them, but yeah. if you're starting as a complete novice and trying to deal with them, is there certain loops that you have to jump through, or are they pretty willing to take anybody on that's going to do business with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to work both ways. You really have to vet your suppliers, but then on the other side as well, it's like, they must be dealing with a ton of tire kickers, let's just put it that way, who they go straight into, hi, what's the price for this? And you can tell that with a lot of suppliers that you speak to, especially for the first time. They want to get the price to you as soon as possible. But I personally like to take things a little bit slowly, introduce myself and get to know them a little bit, but at the same time as steering the conversation to those bits of information that I'm looking for.
And whenever you first, so I'm just thinking, you had to start somewhere with a supplier. Was a supplier recommended to you, or did you have to go out and research it yourself and try and find your own one?
So are you talking about the first ever product that we did?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that I did that from scratch. I found the suppliers from scratch, went on to Alibaba, spoke to a few suppliers who dealt with the types of materials and the types of products we were looking for. So yeah, that was a completely cold lead, and I'm thinking about that supplier now. That first supplier that we ever dealt with, we've just put an order through now, what, 5 or 6 years after the fact.
Great. So you've got an ongoing relationship with them. So I take it they're inviting you to their Christmas party this year.
Well, you know what, they keep inviting me over, and a lot of our listeners will know about the Canton Fair or the Spring Fair. They've got a few kind of trade shows showcasing all of their products. I keep meaning to go over, and I have a feeling early next year we might be over, especially with some of the new services that we're looking at trialing and putting out to our clients. So yeah, I think we'll be biting the bullet and actually going over there sooner rather than later.
With all the business you've put through them, I'm sure they'll treat you like royalty. But is it a really competitive market? I mean, if you take their code, for instance, and you marry it off against somebody else's code, are they really keen for your business? Do they sort of make a big deal over you and really try to look after you?
I mean, like the suppliers and the agents that we worked with over the years, especially the agents, they're really handy to have because they're able to tell whether a supplier that you're talking to on Alibaba is an agent kind of working on behalf of other factories, or if they are indeed the factory themselves, and that's where the price can differ as well. And we worked with trading companies over the past. We are paying more of a premium. We're able to get lower, say, trial order quantities compared to manufacturers of the product. But it's always handy to have somebody there who's on the ground who can tell the difference between the two sort of suppliers and are able to get more competitive pricing.
Great. And if we go, so you contact Supplier. Where do you start? So you've got an idea for a product, and then you want to get a sample from them. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so there's a bit between that. So we're looking at running the numbers first because we wouldn't want to order a sample with a product that's just not going to work financially. So it always starts off, after the introductions and the chat beforehand. I'm looking for key areas, looking at the dimensions of the product, but also the weight of the product, because that's going to impact the shipping, also the Amazon fees as well whenever it goes to the end user or the end consumer. All the inland charges, getting your product from, say, the port or from a warehouse in your destination marketplace to the Amazon fulfillment center, that's going to impact, or the dimensions and the weight of the product are going to impact that cost. So we need to factor all of these numbers and put them together before arranging a sample. So it's always going to be running the numbers first and then getting it to the point where, okay, cool, this is workable or it's viable. Now let's move it into the next stage, which is getting that product in our hands and seeing if there's any issues, if there's anything that we need to amend on the product, how the packaging is going to look, all of those bits before eventually placing the final order.
Okay, so you get that product, you look at it, you think, okay, that's going to be good, and then you decide you're going to order a quantity. I take it you have a minimum order quantity that you have to place with them. Does that worry you that, that's one product, is, if I order 100 and that's quite a high cost, or is every product going to be of the same quality? And how do they take payment for that? Do you have to pay 50% up front, or is it just depends on your relationship that you've built with them?
Yeah, another benefit of, having people on the ground who can do the sourcing for us, they're generally able to, or, they speak the same language, they're able to negotiate on our behalf and bring those initial order quantities as low as possible. We generally aim for $2,000 to $3,000 on a cost price of an initial order, because bearing in mind this is a product that hasn't been in the market, or we haven't tested the market, so we wouldn't want to order a full container load of something without fully testing the market first. So it's going to vary between different suppliers what their minimum order quantity is, and we also have to bear in mind that private label and this sort of business, we are starting off as small fry. When it comes to dealing with these manufacturers, we have to bear in mind that they're working on container loads with big retailers. So, a lot of people would say, looking at pricing, for example, how hard should we go on that negotiation? Is kind of difficult whenever we're trying to negotiate a lower quantity order to start off with. We don't have that leverage of doing container loads where we can really push for a lower cost price. So there's a few things to kind of temper. But in terms of ordering, to answer your question, Paul, generally aim for 30% to 50% as a deposit before production, and then the remaining balance before they ship it.
Okay. We started with suppliers because that's what you were dealing with today. But before you even get to the supplier stage, there's a whole research side of things before you find that product that you actually want to go to a supplier and ask them, can they create and help you with. With the research side of things, where do you start? I mean, do you just literally, I mean, is there a tool that helps you with that, or do you just start doing it very manually? And
yeah, you know what, and that's what I love about the research side of things is that, you know, there are a ton of tools out there that will promise you that they will assist in finding new products and new niches to move into. And what I love about the whole research side of things is that you can't let a robot do it for you, because there's so many little nuances in a market that could determine whether it's a good market to move into or whether it's a bad one. So yeah, unless there's an AI that's being developed at the moment, and I'll eventually eat my words, I'm kind of happy that I can't be replaced.
luckily for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of the research process, I like to work with springboards. A lot of our members will find this familiar. A lot of the people that maybe aren't clients of private label people will kind of wonder what that is, and it's basically a list of products that we develop and have developed over time, where allows us to spring forward into new research avenues. So say, for example, you know, somebody brand new coming in, they go onto the Amazon platform and they can see all of those flashy kind of iPhone covers and gadgets that are showcased on the front page, on the homepage. It's really hard to navigate from there, because, you know, you go into that product, you look at all the sponsored products inside there. That's our methodology whenever we're researching. But really, it kind of leads you to more flashy products and more hot products, which are very saturated in market. Products that will require a lot of advertising spend, and, you know, really hard to forge a product in that area. So we work with springboards that have a list of products that are far away from that, let's say. So more kind of niche products, or what we call product-rich areas that kind of lead into different other niches that aren't so flashy like the surface level. So that's what I use to start off my research, and then I'll just see where it ends up, similar to this podcast.
Yeah, hopefully it ends up somewhere. Okay, so say some of your most successful products, would you go as far as saying they're boring? You know, I know you say like flashy products, and people tend to look at those, and it's always, I suppose, it's a temptation when somebody says, well, what do you sell on Amazon? But some of the most successful products you've had are probably quite run-of-the-mill, day-to-day things.
Whenever people ask you what kind of products you sell, you know, you're almost expecting them to assume that it's the on-trend new sort of gadgety products that haven't been released yet, and all of that stuff. And, you know, when they hear that you sell a gym accessory that is more of an everyday product that you'd see in every gym, you know, the first thought would be like, well, how many people are going to buy that? But yeah, I mean, we still sell that product today, and it's one that I expect that we'll be selling long into the future.
Great. And, you know, there's quite a lot of people that I've spoken to who their first product is definitely not something that they still sell today, and they learn a lot from that first product. And that's the opposite with you. You know, you've obviously kept that product going because it's been a good one for you. But what are the key elements within research? There's obviously key criteria that a product has to meet for it to be a success, or to be even close to a success. What are the key things that you look for straight away? Yeah,
so, you know, we're talking about that. One of the criteria already is how bland the product is. You know, it's like, why do we look for bland products? There has to be some function to that. And, you know, one of the main ones is that it's inherently going to have less competition. but also in order to compete with keywords on PPC advertising, for example. You can imagine the types of bids you'll have, for example, a sports water bottle, very competitive, very flashy product. Let's say an iPhone cover again as well, very competitive markets. In order to rank for iPhone case or iPhone 15 case, you're going to be spending a lot on advertising for that, for example. Whereas if you're let's use that first product, the gym tricep rope. Fewer people are competing for those terms. Therefore, the bid for those terms are going to be less as well. So we're looking for those lower hanging fruits. So that's blandness. If we're looking at another criteria would be the number of competitors that are in that market as well. The more the competitors there are, the harder of a choice it would be for a consumer to pick a product. Therefore, we aim for as few as possible, but not no competitors, because that won't tell us that there's a market for it. So a few other ones as well. Price point is definitely a factor. If we're looking at a $10 item versus a $50 item, we'd need to sell a lot more of the $10 item in order to make it worthwhile. But it's also kind of looking at all of these criteria and putting them together, because there's no such thing as an ideal market. There's just a collection of criteria where we make decisions from.
And is there a price point that you think is perfect, if you like, or a range that you would move to? Is something far too expensive that you would want to take a risk on it, or is something better going for something cheaper at the start? Or
not really. I mean, I'd say the minimum would be $20. That's not to say if something is averaging at $17.99 or even $14.99, the numbers would have to make sense on the other side. And if we're looking at the flip side as well, if something has a sales price of $150 or $200, there's nothing that tells me that I should run away from that. It all come down to, generally the higher price products are going to have a higher cost price. So therefore, that minimum order quantity is going to have to reflect that as well. So I wouldn't shy away from anything, say, on the higher end, but it's more so on the lower side. $20 would be my lowest.
I'm thinking back here. I remember during COVID, for instance, and all the craziness that surrounded that. I remember somebody saying to me that the likes of home DJ sets, things like that, people were doing more at home in terms of, performing, like even recording things that they were doing at home, like music and stuff like that. Do you find that market trends, they affect things on Amazon massively, where, you've looked at something in the past and thought, no, that doesn't have the key numbers that it needs to make it work, but then all of a sudden something happens worldwide or whatever it might be, and you go back and you look at it and all of a sudden it's just taken off?
Yeah, and you also have to take that with a pinch of salt as well, because we can look at anomalies that can really affect the market status. For example, coronavirus, as you said, it's like we would have seen a massive spike in, say the PPE dispensers, for example. While it might meet all our criteria, a acrylic dispenser that holds face masks, for example, you'd see a massive spike in that during that time. And you could argue it might have leveled out now into more of data that we can work with, but we also have to take it with a pinch of salt as well. And going back to the tricep ropes, I was just talking to Noel there in the office the other day. We were doing, I think it must have been about 50 a day just during the pandemic, and it was just going crazy. We couldn't keep it in stock because we had limits on how much stock we can send in into the Amazon fulfillment centers, but it was just going crazy. And my only kind of logic behind that is that people were working out at home, setting up home gyms, and then whenever lockdown started to end, people might have been ordering these accessories that they wanted to use in the gym, so they wouldn't be sharing it with other people as well. So it was definitely an interesting time, but you definitely have to take a lot of that data with a pinch of salt, because it's not the norm. Course,
and then also you have to take into account the length of time that it'll take a product to get to you. So it might be a market trend right now, but by the time you actually order the product with a supplier and by the time it gets to you, the market might have changed. What's your average sort of time frame from getting a sample, so going right back, getting a sample and then ordering it with a supplier before you're ready to go to market with it, if you like? Do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, whenever it comes to that, we it's all going to come down to MOQ, doing that first trial order and get an element of a run rate. So how many units am I selling in a 2-week period, and then base that on and that should determine as to what the reorder amount should be. If we're aiming for 4 to 6 months worth of stock at one time, and bearing in mind a bit of a buffer, so that we're not just aiming for that last stock or last unit out as the reorder comes in. We want a bit of a buffer because we don't want that opportunity cost of running out of stock. But if we're looking at, say, the coronavirus and those scenarios, we were doing 50 a day of that product. And looking back, we overstocked because we were going on data without any kind of real visibility into the future. And we overstocked. We ordered far too much of that unit because after that whole situation started to line out and everything got back to normal, we ended up with more stock than we needed.
So you're hoping for another coronavirus? Yeah, no, it's interesting because, say, you've overstocked on that, but if you understock, then you run the risk of, you're missing out because you don't have the stock there and you need to order again. So then you have to wait for a period of time again. So it must be really difficult to get it, right on the button.
I mean, especially when you're dealing with low MOQs and low initial order quantities. If that product takes off, for example, you really haven't hit a ceiling and you didn't have enough stock to see where that ceiling was or see where that trend was going to. So really you'd have to make an educated guess as to how much to reorder. And I think that really comes with experience, because we're looking at, if we're looking at criteria on research, criteria on orders and products, we're looking at the run rate of a product. Has it kind of leveled out into a trend? Is there a seasonality to the product as well? Are there other marketplaces that you want to bring this into? Is it a universal product? And a lot of our clients at private label people also have that luxury of coming to us and giving us, their data, and they have the ability for us to guide them through that process as well.
Okay, so if I'm starting with private label people, am I coming to you at the very, very start of starting a business? Is that the best time to come, or does it matter? Do you have to come? Is it better for me to have done a bit of research and found a product, or does it?
Well, I mean, we take all of that, off of people's hands, with our years of experience on the research process, but also our logistical partners and sourcing agents and client or colleagues in China. We have a lot of infrastructure in order to bring new private label products to market on behalf of other people. So, I mean, we're working with a lot of people where their first product are done with us. So, really kind of leaving it to experts to do the heavy lifting, and then bringing it in and really focusing on the really important stuff, which is the how to sell, looking at the data, keeping the product in stock, which is so important because we don't want that opportunity cost, and then expanding into other marketplaces.
Must be, it must save a huge amount of time for the average person if they can sort of hand it off to you. I mean, if you're coming in as a complete novice, what are the key things you need to have in place to start your Amazon business? Is it banking, or is it a brand, or what?
Yeah, so I mean, you'd have your business entity, business banking, a brand to house your products, and because of the types of products, and no product falls into the same sort of category or product range, we're not really dealing with that sort of thing. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not part of our model. A brand just to kind of house those products, just because Amazon requires that, it allows you to branch off into other areas in terms of A+ content, once your brand is trademarked as well. So really that's where the branding kind of starts and ends. It's more of a means to an end in order to put products into that portfolio. So other than that, Say accounting is certainly important. I'll say that's about it, really. Once you have these things in place, you've got the foundation to build a business.
You mentioned accounting. Are there third-party tools that can help with that in terms of invoicing and running your accounts?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few out there. The one that we use is Xero. It's the one that we were introduced to years ago, and so we haven't had any issues with it. It's really user friendly. It's handy for the accountants to plug into as well. So, yeah, I mean, if I was to recommend anything, it'd probably be that. We're not sponsored by Xero. I think we should speak to them. But I mean, it's the one we use and one that I'd certainly recommend.
Yeah, we'll send them a recording of this. You never know.
Yeah.
But so obviously that is really helpful, because if you can imagine, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you had to do everything yourself, and that's just another whole element to it. In regards to branding, do you think people get a little bit too bogged down in what their brand is going to be and what their logo is or what they call their business?
Again, because it's that landscape of online retail, and your neighbor asks you what you sell and what you do for a living. It's all too easy to say I've got a brand that I sell products under, and then when they start asking what kind of products, that's where it's like, just to dig a hole and let me just jump into it. Don't ask me that question. But because of the kind of structure and the methodology that we use with the style of e-commerce that we're in, a brand, again, is just that means to an end. I think having a bit of pride and a bit of vanity in there, and picking something that you like, but not spending the time, the hassle, and the thousands of pounds that people could really develop a brand on. It's not needed in this model at all. So picking one that you like, because it's going to be one that you're going to be building on or building upon. And then moving on, it's definitely not going to move the needle too much.
Great. Okay, so I'm just thinking about what we've covered, and we've covered basically starting off, so your business entity, your banking, getting your brand. Then somebody can come to private label people and they can say, okay, I've got these things in place. Can you lead on from there? And then do you keep in touch with that person? Do you just tell them what it is you're doing on a day-to-day and what they need to do on a day-to-day? Do you sort of babysit them a little bit? Is that the idea behind it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's quite different. I think what we're trying to create and what we're trying to serve is the hands-off element to things. There's a lot of heavy lifting involved with, say, the research process, the logistical and the sourcing process. A lot of mistakes over the years. They enabled us to make that process a lot more streamlined. So while we've learned from our mistakes, every single one of our clients are able to glean that knowledge and that hands-off area to their business, and allow them to focus on the more important day-to-day reporting. Getting the reporting in. A lot of our clients will understand how important that is. The more and more we talk about this and dissect these markets and these reports over time, because it really does tell us a story and allows us to get the most out of a product whenever we're selling it on Amazon. So does that answer your question, or did I just answer a different question like a politician?
No, I think that sort of answers it. It's literally where I'm trying to think of is a lot of people seem to probably worry a lot about starting their first product and when to actually pull the trigger on that product and when to get it actively selling. Do you think people worry about that too much? I know it's obviously, you need capital and you need to put a little bit of money into it and time, and therefore that's a natural fear. But do you think people overthink it, and really the most important thing is to just get a product, get it out there quickly and take it from there and have that experience of launching that first product?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I would recommend, and that's if you want to get involved in a private label product, then get the ball rolling as soon as possible, because the more and more it's delayed. Because I can tell you from personal experience, I didn't have any friends or family that sold a single product online. I knew that it was something that people did, and I loved the appeal to all of that. But it took me a good solid year from making the decision to go into this direction to actually launching a product. And I think it comes down to that element of risk. So we've got the capital risk, but also the risk of embarrassment in front of everybody, because everybody knows what I was doing, because they were, all my friends and family, we were talking about it, and it's like, what happens if this flops? What happens if I pick the wrong product? Does this actually work? Is this a thing, or am I just kind of like just navigating in the dark here? So we kind of remove all of that. We remove all of that apprehension on picking the right product. We remove all of the potential mistakes that can come from the supply chain. So if we're eliminating as much risk as possible on your behalf, then I wouldn't have any reason to delay pursuing a product if this is the style of business that you want to grow.
Well, it's a massive shortcut for people, isn't it? It really gets them to market far, far quicker than having to do it all by yourself. So I guess that's a massive advantage of going with private label people, I guess.
Absolutely.
But okay, well, that gives us lots to think about going forward. And I hope the guys that have been listening have been taking down a few notes or putting things in their mind that they want to ask for future podcasts. But I think that was a good place to start. And I think coming into the next one, we can maybe delve a little bit deeper into what happens when the actual product comes through and once it starts selling, and then talk about some keywords and PPC and that sort of thing. But thank you, Ollie. Thanks for now.
My pleasure.
Always great to speak to you, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Great. Speak soon.
Thanks.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question, or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Well, thank you to Ollie. I hope everybody found that beneficial. Obviously, selling an Amazon product comes through a wide spectrum, and there may be some things within the chat that you'd like us to delve deeper into. As always, this podcast is for you, our listeners, so you can let us know if there are any specifics you'd like us to cover. For now, though, thanks for listening, and we'll chat soon on the Private Label Pod.